Morning, everyone. Today we are going to learn about grant seeking, and I am Rachel Goff-Albritton from the Office of Research Development. I am the assistant director in our office, and I help faculty with proposal development services and create resources to help them with grant seeking. I received my PhD from the University of South Florida in Tampa, a master's from UNC Chapel Hill, and my bachelor's from here at FSU. And while at FSU, I was in the honors in the major program, and I also received the Best H Ward grant. And so I'm here today also giving back. I also have had 4 UROP students, I believe. So these programs for undergraduates are very important to me, and I really appreciate that FSU has these programs for the students, for the staff, for the faculty at FSU to help us cultivate a very positive experience for research here. So it's wonderful to be here with you all today. And I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to share what experiences, if any, you've had with grant writing. So you can post that in the chat. You can also just unmute yourself and speak up. So if anyone could share, you could say, I've never had any experiences with grant writing, or you can say, I took 1 class in grant writing. What are your experiences with grant writing? Could a couple of you share? Again, you can type in the chat box, or you can just unmute yourself and share. Hi, Tara.
I'll speak up first. I just want to say that I've had no experience with grant writing, and my biggest block is trying to figure out how to even get started and what opportunities are available of what types of grants should be written. So that's where I stand.
Thank you for sharing, Tara. Appreciate it. Well, I'm very glad that you're here today. I hope that afterwards that you do not feel that block. If you do, then you'll know who to reach out to keep moving forward with grant writing and get started with grant seeking and grant writing. Anybody else want to share? I see in the chat, no experience. I have no experience. Anybody else have any experience with grant seeking or grant writing? Okay, so maybe we have a lot of folks that are going to really benefit from getting this brand new information. If you already have some experience with grant writing, then this information can help you to kind of rethink what you've been doing, or just remember some things that you might have forgotten. So why are grants important? So I wanted to know if anyone here can share why they think that grants might be important, or specifically why grants might be important for you and your discipline. How have grants helped someone that you've known, or maybe a faculty member that you've worked with, or another student? Can anyone share why grants have been important, or why you might want to get a grant? And you can put this information in the chat box, or you can also unmute yourself and speak up. Yes, so grants are important because Nico shared they provide money and funding for research. Yes, that is correct. Anyone else? Why are grants important, or why do you want to apply for a grant? Why do you think they're important for you?
For me, grants are important in regards to our students. I would like to be able to obtain funding for new technologies so that they can get experience of what they are likely to see in the workforce. So being able to make them more prepared with the tools and technologies that they can see in school that are going to be just the same or very similar to what they are likely to experience in their careers.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. And I see another person in the chat sharing research funding. So Tara mentioned some technology, student support programs. So grants are really a win-win situation for both the individual receiving the grant and the sponsor who is providing the grant. So the sponsor may have money that is specifically for students. It could be specifically for helping students to be prepared for the workplace. So if you could find an agency that was specifically focused on that, then that's where you would want to apply. Sometimes you can find an agency that has more broad goals. And so you can propose your research project and that might work within their mission as well. So these grants are vital to the daily operations of the research institution. They're important for, research revenues. They bring programs to campus that would normally not be able to exist. They can provide scholarships, student support programs, building projects, renovations, research support staff, and lots of other things. So they can be very helpful for the institution and the researchers. And you can check out some of the exciting FSU research projects on the Office of Research website. They constantly are posting stories of research going on at FSU, and that can be from faculty researchers or collaborations with students, student support programs. And then also, I know on your undergraduate program also sends out news on FSU student projects. So there's a lot going on the FSU campus. And so it's really helpful for FSU to receive this funding. It's also really important for the funding organization or the sponsor because they want to fulfill their mission or their purpose. And that could be a federal funding agency or some kind of private funding agency like a foundation. Grants come in many shapes and sizes. They can be very small, they can be very large, they can be millions of dollars, they can be $500. And either way, it is depending on what you need, on how much money that you're going to want from a grant, what agency you're going to seek and to research. You can get a list of all the grants that are awarded to FSU each month in this link here at the bottom of the page. And we will give you these slides at the end of the presentation so that you'll be able to get all these links and check out all these different sites. I was just mentioning to your leaders in the undergraduate program, David Montez and Michael Franklin, that I think that this PowerPoint, these slides will be really helpful whenever you are writing a grant to kind of review these and think about it again right before you write your grant. And so you can come back and look at these things, right when you're ready to get started. So there are 3 phases of funding success that we're going to talk about today. So finding funding is the first step. And I know, Tara, you mentioned you're not even really sure where to find the funding. So, we will start there. We're going to move on to proposal planning and then proposal writing. So to find funding or to learn about finding funding on our website, ord.fsu.edu, and I'll have that webpage at the end of the slides as well. You can go to our Finding Funding module. And this is a whole module that talks about finding funding. It talks about things to consider for federal funding, things to consider for state funding, and also private foundations, and then just general considerations for finding funding. So definitely check out this Finding Funding module. It's only available for FSU students, staff, faculty. You have to have your FSU login to access that module. And you can get there by going to our ord.fsu.edu website and clicking on the piggy bank icon that says Finding Funding. And you can get to this funding module. And then also right below that, you'll see the link to our database that we subscribe to called Pivot. And so if you don't know what Pivot is, you are going to learn about Pivot today. And if you do know what Pivot is, we'll learn a little bit about searching strategies. So Pivot is a funding database that has 21,000 plus records of funding opportunities worth an estimated 59 billion. There's scholarly profiles, scholarly profiles of researchers on there, about 3.5 million researcher profiles, and it's free to all of you if you have an @fsu.edu email address. It could say @my.fsu.edu or @kim. or @med.fsu.edu, but it just has to have that fsu.edu email address. And Pivot is a database for finding funding. So like if you're wanting to find Nike tennis shoes, then you would go to Nike, but the Nike website. But if you want to find just some kind of really great tennis shoes for running, then you might go to like Zappos, because then you can have the opportunity to look at a bunch of different brands. Well, Pivot is kind of like that. It's a database that has funding across disciplines. It's multidisciplinary in scope, and it also has all categories of sponsors, public sponsors, private sponsors. And you can do some really cool searches in Pivot. You can choose advanced search, you can search profiles, and then there's also funding opportunities that are listed as suggested funding opportunities for you based on your profile. Pivot allows you to share funding opportunities, tag them so you can look at them later, and then create searches for funding opportunities and save those. So what I'd like you all to do, if you don't have a Pivot account already, you can do this on your cell phone even. I think it's pretty easy to do it on there. If you have another screen open, you can go to this website. You can get there from our website, ord.fsu.edu, and click on the piggy bank icon and get there. Or you can go to this website right here, https://pivot.proquest, and then go to sign up. Click on sign up, and then we're going to create a Pivot account. And you're going to use an email address and create a password. You're not going to start getting spam from Pivot. Don't worry about that. So you can just create this account, no strings attached, and use your email to create the account. And then once you fill in the information, you'll get an email to confirm that you created an account. You just click on that confirmation, and then you can log in. And you go to that same page, that same main page to log in, just right next to sign up is log in. So you go there to log in to Pivot. And then since we're not together in a computer lab where you all have your screen open and we go through searches together, I'm going to do some screen sharing and just share with you the main pages of Pivot and explain it to you. But if you ever need help with actually doing searches, if you're having a hard time following these instructions, feel free to reach out and I can help you further to do this kind of search. But this is the Pivot home screen right here. And we have been able to make it kind of FSU focused, but this is an outside company that does this, creates this funding database for different universities. So at the Pivot home screen, you can click on the tab that says funding, and there's two ways to search for funding in Pivot. So we can search by keyword, or we can choose, my favorite is choose advanced search. But first I'm gonna go by keyword, and you click on the funding tab, and then you see the tab below it that says search by keyword. And you can just start typing in words. You can see my search here is based on racial issues, gender differences, equality, and I'm building a search here. And then you just click search, and it will bring up some funding opportunities related to those keywords. My favorite way to do a search, because it gets much more in depth into your research area, is to click on the funding tab and then choose advanced search. So I choose advanced search because I want to conduct both broad and narrow searches. And so to give you an example of what I mean by this, in my background, I went to school as a speech therapist, a speech pathologist. And so my research area was working with people who've had a stroke and they have a communication disorder from a stroke, and that's called aphasia. Well, if I search in here aphasia, that would be a narrow search. It would be very specific. I'm looking at funding for people with aphasia. And so if I search for aphasia, I might get 1 or 2 results in my funding search. But if I search for something broader like stroke or neurological condition or communication disorder, that would be a broad search. And so that's why it is hard for other people to do a search for you. You kind of have to play around with the keywords that you want to search for that are related to your research, and think about how they can be more broad and how they can be more narrow. And so when you get to the funding advanced search option, you have some fields at the top where you type in your keywords. And this is similar to a library database. So I don't know if you've gone to any of the library literature review webinars or workshops, but they can be very helpful for searching for journals and different research databases in the library. Well, this is very similar to that kind of search that you would do when you're doing a literature review. So at the top of your page, you type in your keywords, and across the top means that those words would be the same. If you're doing a horizontal row, those words would be similar words that mean the same thing. So I might use the words stroke or neurological condition or aphasia on the top. And then the next field going down, the columns, are something else that you want to research. So I might say older adults or elderly or just adults or something like that. So going across the row, those are words that are the same. And then going down the row are words that are different areas of your research. And then the top part of this search are things that you want to include in your search. And so you might want to include that your research is being conducted in Florida in the United States. If you are not a US citizen, you might want to put your citizenship in that box, because it does help you to find some funding opportunities that are relevant to your citizenship if you are not a US citizen. And then that's pretty much all I put in the top usually. You can put all these other things like what type of funding do you want to look for, or what kind of sponsor do you want to look for? Do you want to look specifically at funding from a private agency or specifically at funding from a federal agency? You can put that information in there and narrow your search even more. But I like to kind of keep it pretty broad in the beginning as far as those fields. And then at the bottom, so at the top, these are all things that you include in your search. And down here at the bottom, these are things that you don't want in your search. So on the exclude section, it looks the same down here under exclude. If I'm searching for funding that's just for faculty, I will usually take out opportunities that are just for students. If you're not a faculty member, and I mean, if you're not a student and you're a faculty member or a staff member, then you want to take out the applicant type of a student, because there's a lot of funding opportunities for students, which is a good thing for all of you students. So if you are a student, then under the include section up here, you might want to include applicant type student, undergraduate student, if you are an undergraduate student, or you can include graduate student there. So that just helps you narrow your search. And let's say I do a search on fine arts, the arts areas and arts or humanities. And then up here at the top, it tells you what your search was. So I did art or fine arts humanities, and my activity location was Florida. And then it's not commercial or government. I put some things that was not me. I'm not commercial or government. I think I also said I'm not a small business. If you are a student at FSU and you're applying for a grant that is to a federal agency, then you're actually applying from FSU. Like, you are representing FSU. Anytime you apply as an FSU student to some sponsor, you may be applying on behalf of FSU. So it's important to talk to your offices, like your undergraduate research office, and ask them about the grant and make sure that there's nothing that you need to do with the university in order to apply for it. Sometimes there will just be some foundation that is accepting grants from any individual, and you might not go through the FSU system. But usually if you're applying for a grant as part of FSU, it's good to talk with your undergraduate offices for research, or your graduate offices for research, or our office, to make sure there's nothing that you need to do as far as connecting FSU with that sponsor. Just something to think about. But when you do this search, you get all these results here. And you can search further by clicking on any of these labels here. And like, you could just search for research project grants and innovation, a certain funding type, or you can say, I want to search just for private foundation or nonprofit funding, and just search that kind of funding. To look at these funding opportunities, if you want to just get a little blurb about the funding opportunity, just read a little bit about it. You can click on the magnifying glass icon and click there on that magnifying glass icon. It will give you just a little blurb. It will say what the funding opportunity is about and who is eligible. So this is really important. I always recommend just clicking on the link for the funding opportunity, the main link, after, if you think you might be interested in it, after you've looked at the little blurb, click on that main link, and then you'll get to this page that gives you all the information about that funding opportunity. And I scroll down to see if I'm eligible. So this section at the very bottom that says eligibility, I want to make sure that that's always the very first thing I do. So remember, if you want to take away anything from this search, how to do this search, remember that the first thing you do when you do a search is you check to see if you think you're eligible for the funding opportunity. Because if it's not for a student and you're a student, if it's for somebody else, then you don't want to waste your time reading all about it if it doesn't fit with what you're looking for. So make sure you're eligible to apply. And if you ever have a question, if you're not sure if you're eligible after you read that, you can reach out to your Office of Undergraduate Research and find out if you're eligible. Okay, and then another really cool thing about Pivot is the profile section. If you're looking for a collaborator, or you want to find out what faculty at FSU do a certain type of research, you can go to the profiles section and search for keywords of research topics, and different faculty will come up. Their names will come up, and when you click on their name, you'll get to their profile. You can also create your own profile under the profile section. If you have a profile already, you can edit it. And then there are funding matches on your profile page that are related to your profile. So there's also a keyword section. You can put in keywords related to your research, and then there will be funding opportunities related to your research area. So that is Pivot. Again, know that if you start searching in Pivot and you have questions, feel free to reach out and we can help you to better search Pivot and to try to find a funding opportunity that works for you. But you have this really robust tool right at your fingertips that's free for you. So please do take advantage of that. I so wish that I would have searched for funding for graduate school. When I was an undergrad, I received that Best Ward grant for my research, but I had, when I went to graduate school, I had a stipend where I worked as a research assistant. So I had some money, but if I would have known about this kind of database, this kind of tool, I definitely would have searched for funding for grants to pay for my graduate school. So, and I knew colleagues that did that, and it was, they didn't have student loan debt. So, or at least not as much as I had. So it can be very helpful to find a grant that fits for you and apply for it to help you pay for your graduate school. So there's two other sources for searching for funding. There is grants.gov, which is specific to federal funding. And it also comes with an app. So it's just for federal funding. There's some federal funding that's specific to graduate student fellowships. So you can search grants.gov for those kinds of funding opportunities. They are very competitive. And so learning about grant seeking and grant writing will be very helpful for those. And then the foundation directory is a source of private funding opportunities. So you can search there to find any private opportunities. These are both on Pivot though. So I think that the best place to search is using Pivot. And then once you find an agency that you really, really think is great for you, it fits with your research area, then you can go to that specific agency and look at, or sponsor, and look at all the funding opportunities that they have. So you can leave these databases for searching funding and just go straight to the website of the agency once you found one that works for you. So these are just ways to search for funding. Once you find the funding, go to the agency. And then there's also funding from the graduate school and also some tools for searching for funding from the graduate school. So you'll get, again, at the end of the presentation, you'll receive these slides and you'll have the links to these websites from the graduate school. So definitely look at those. I noticed that one was due October 15th. So it's very important to do your homework on these funding opportunities so that you can catch the deadlines. So looking at these, I know there are a lot of undergraduate students on this call as well. So if you're an undergraduate student and you're planning to go to graduate school, it's never too early to look at these fellowships and grant opportunities, because once you get into graduate school, it's going to be a quick turnaround for when these deadlines occur. And so if you can go ahead and plan and think about it in undergrad, that's great. But at least knowing about it and thinking, okay, right when I get in grad school, I'm going to start searching for funding opportunities is another strategy. And then at the end of this presentation, your leaders from the undergraduate research programs will, David Montez and Michael Franklin will talk to you about a couple of the funding opportunities that are available from the undergraduate research programs. And so now we're going to talk about proposal planning. Does anyone have any questions here though, before we move on?
Rachel, there was one question. I don't know if you got to it or saw it in the chat, but there was a question about what if the funding I need is for research, whose main topic is not in the US?
Okay, good question. So the main topic is not in the US. It can make it a little more tricky, but actually a lot of researchers at FSU do research outside of the US. So it's very common. It doesn't have to be in the US. So it really just depends on the funding agency. So even when you're using Pivot, what you would do is whenever you did your search, you wouldn't type in US as the research location, and you would just search for funding. Actually in Pivot, I almost would still say that your research was conducted in Florida and in the US, because a lot of times in Pivot, it will tell you about funding opportunities that are only for like the state of Georgia or something like that, or only for, for Tennessee. And so if you put Florida, I think it will help. And you're still conducting the research in Florida because you are at Florida State. So as far as the agency is concerned, the research is still conducted in Florida. However, the topic is outside of the US, and that's okay. But you would just have to make sure that the agency mission aligned with your topic. Did you want?
Yes, this was my question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that was my question. It's just that my research topic is about another country, but it would be if I do look for a grant, it would be mostly to like maybe interview or survey people in Jordan. So that's why I was asking that question, since yes, the research could be developed in the US and within Florida, but it might be a harder process since it's something that it has to do with other people in other countries. So that's why I just wanted to ask to make sure.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you for clarifying that. That's a great question. And that is very common that research is conducted in other countries. And I actually, when I said, what are grants for? Why are grants important? Traveling, being able to travel to do your research can be very expensive. So a lot of times a grant will pay for your travel. So your travel to Jordan. And so that is completely fine. So you would just need to find, why are you doing this research? And then who cares about that why? Your main goal for your research needs to align with the sponsor for your grant. And that is definitely possible. Sometimes agencies just want to see an increase in science or an increase in healthcare or an increase in welfare. So they have some broader goal. And so it's okay if the research is outside of the US. Sometimes it's tricky if it's a federal agency, then they might say, oh, I just want this research in the US, but not most of the time. So that should be fine, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And so for proposal planning, the first thing, this is kind of what we've been talking about. The first thing you want to do is get to know the sponsor. So you're looking for funding, you're finding something that looks like it might match what your research is looking for. You find a sponsor that is interested in this kind of research. And so now you want to see how can you help the sponsor achieve their mission. So this needs to be mutually beneficial. As I mentioned, it must be a good fit for the priorities of the sponsor. And so it can be really important to build a relationship with the program officer. And this is even the case if you're working on an undergraduate grant. If you're working on a grant and applying to the undergraduate research program or applying to an internal grant, if you have a question, make sure that you really read the announcement for the funding opportunity. Read every bit of that announcement. so that you can make sure that if you have a question, it's not already answered in that funding announcement. And then after you've really read it, you want to reach out to the program officer for that funding opportunity. And generally what you do is you give them a little summary of your research project and you say, this is my interest. Is this something that fits with the mission of your program? And then they can help you. They can answer any questions that you might have. If they have multiple programs and your funding opportunity fits better with a different program that they have, they'll let you know. So sometimes they even help decide who gets funded. Not always. Sometimes there's a group of reviewers that do all the reviewing of proposals to decide who gets funded, but sometimes that program officer has the final say, or they just have some input. So it's very important to have a good relationship with the program officer of the grant that you're applying for, so that they might choose you if they have that opportunity to do so. So you want to make sure that you get to know that program officer, that you don't bother them too much. You want to send one email. And then, I mean, if you don't hear from them within a week or more than a week, then you can reach back out to them. You can even ask to schedule a phone call. Generally, you don't just call a program officer. The etiquette is that you email them first and tell them about your project, and then ask for a phone call at their convenience. And so that can be very helpful. And then you want to look at, if you want to research a little more about the sponsor, you can look at webinars that they might have that talks about their grant programs, look at their websites. You can see who was funded before to see what were things that they wanted to fund before. So does your research kind of align with previous funded research, and see if it's a good fit with the agency? And then once you get that, the guidelines for the grant program, which are often called requests for proposals, RFP, funding announcement, funding opportunity announcement, an FOA, or a funding solicitation. So you'll hear this a lot when you start looking at grants. You'll see this written on the top of grants. This is a request for proposals. This is a funding opportunity announcement or a funding solicitation. They all just mean this is the guidelines for this grant program. This is what you have to do. This is when it's due, you know, all the guidelines. So you need to take that and read it line by line. And the best thing to do is to develop a checklist of each requirement of that grant. Read and reread this, this request for proposals or solicitation, and then make sure that you address each one of the things that they say you must do or should get done. Make sure that you do get it done. So follow those guidelines. And then create a proposal timeline. So you want to establish a timeline for when you will get a grant submitted. Sometimes you don't have this many months. That's okay. You don't. This is for this example here of a timeline was for a very big, very large grant that was for 5 years, a career development grant for this faculty member. And so she worked on it over many months. But you might have a little less time, but what you want to do, instead of having months here, you would have just different weeks or days that you would work on different parts of the grant proposal. And so creating this proposal schedule will decrease your stress and anxiety, increase your ability to ask for help, and then ultimately increase your proposal quality. And so you can see in this example here that we actually had others editing and reviewing the grant. Once she wrote the grant, we had others reviewing it and editing it, giving her the feedback and then giving her time to address that feedback before she submitted it. Does anyone have any questions about proposal planning? About getting to know the sponsor, proposal, creating a proposal checklist, or creating a timeline for your proposal development? Okay, I don't see any in the chat. We can also take more questions at the end. Proposal writing. We want to start with a proposal outline. And so what we do is we follow that checklist for the requests for proposals. You created a checklist of what must be in your proposal. And now the agency will sometimes suggest a format for your proposal. So sometimes they'll give you the headers, and you actually want to use those headers. So if they say one section is on your background of your work, then you want to title one section background, and underneath it, you write your background. If they suggest a format, you must follow that outline. Sometimes they don't suggest a format, especially if it's a private foundation. And so it can be helpful to look at the list of past awardees, people who have received the grant before, and you can try emailing them or emailing a few of them and seeing if they would mind sharing their proposal, you know, saying, I'm new at grant writing, I'm new at writing for this agency. I haven't written for this agency before. Would you mind sharing your successful proposal with me as an example? And so that's always great. Some agencies will have part of the proposal actually on their website if it's a federal agency. But if it's a private agency, they usually just list the awardees' names and their project name. But most agencies are required to give that information to the public. So all the federal agencies are required to share with you how they're spending the money. So there are award searches for the National Science Foundation. There is, it's called the NIH Reporter. If you're applying for a National Institute for Health, the NIH Reporter allows you to actually put a little section from your own proposal into a search box, and they will find similar awarded proposals that match your research based on, you know, your little blurb about your own research. So it's a really cool tool from the National Institutes of Health. So every agency has a little different way of providing you with the information for past awardees. And then if all else fails and you can't get an example of a successful proposal and the agency didn't give you a suggestion for the format for the proposal, then you can use this Hellmeyer's Catechism, this format right here, where you tell them what you were trying to do, how it is done today, or how it's been done in the past, and what are the limitations of the current practice, how your project is innovative, it's a new approach, and why you think it will be successful. And then you want to tell them who cares. What, you know, who cares that you do this research? What difference will it make? What are the risks involved in your research? So what could be the limitations? What could go wrong? And what are the midterm and final checks for success? So there could something could go wrong. So in the middle of this project, we're gonna talk about how we've done and the successes we made, how we evaluate that, and then at the end, we'll also talk about what our success may be. And that might be that we presented at a conference, or it might be that we posted on a website for, for a bunch of schools to be able to access that information. Or it might be that we publish journal articles, or it might be all of those things. So that is one format that you can follow. And when you're writing proposals, you want to make sure that you make your key ideas stand out. So you'll want to bold, italicize, or underline these key points. I generally recommend to just choose one or two of those styles and not choose all three. You don't want it to be like too much going on. So generally I just prefer bold. So here's kind of an example of mostly bold. There are a few italicized words throughout the text, and you can also see the headers that were requested by the agency. So the agency requested an introduction, a proposed approach, expected outcomes. And so they organized their proposal to follow exactly what the agency asked for. And then they're using these styles of using bold print to make the key points stand out. A proposal is a little different from a journal article. So a journal article has much more jargon, much more background. A proposal is more like a job interview. So you're really telling the agency why you should be chosen for the job. So you want to present your ideas simply. You don't want to use big words or big phrases. You want to make it easy to understand and easy to read, and also decreasing the frustration of reviewers that are reading a lot of proposals. You want to make it more fun for them and easy for them. So you want to avoid using language that is hard to support or very subjective. So you want to be very specific. This is really important. You see the example of some of this grandiose language, like the one at the bottom that says, with this single $100,000 grant, I will, and then you list things that require millions of dollars. So you want to make sure that you're very specific about what you're actually going to do during the time that you're given this money to do it. You want, instead of saying this research will solve climate change and end world hunger, you want to make it very specific about what things will you be doing that helps climate change. You're not going to solve all of the world problems in your grant proposal. What exactly are you going to focus on? And so here's some examples where someone is not so specific in their language and then someone is more specific. So a bad example is, based on this prior research, the next step is obvious. A good example would be, based on this prior research, the next step is, and state the next step. So you want to make sure that you're giving them all the information that they need. So someone might say, we expect our work to yield important results. Well, what are those results? Instead, you should say, we expect our work to yield, and then put these specific results. And then even go on to say, these results are important because. So making sure that you really, they don't have any questions to ask. And sometimes when you're getting into writing, it's hard for you to see that you haven't been specific enough. And so it can be really helpful to have someone else look at your writing and give you that kind of feedback. So you might tell them, is there anything that's not specific enough? Should I explain something a little bit better? Do you understand what I'm actually doing here? You can also go back to that, the Hellmeyer's Catechism, and see, am I answering all of these questions? So you want to make sure that you're being specific. You also want to make sure that you're using graphics appropriately. So here is a list of the different types of graphics that you might use in your proposal: charts, graphs, photos, illustrations. And so this kind of tells you what each of these, the purpose of them would be. So you just want to think about that when you're using graphs. It needs to draw the reader's attention and increase their understanding or their retention of the content. So sometimes it's easier to take something in when you see it in a visual form. And so adding that in can be super helpful. So definitely think about adding some of those into your proposals instead of just having all text. So, and also remember that captions are not labels. So whenever you do include a graphic, explain what the graphic is for. So if you have some kind of visual component to your proposal, make sure that it's not just a label that is unexplained. Make sure that you include a caption that explains exactly what they're seeing in that image. And here's another example of the difference between a label, which is just kind of the title of what your figure is, but then the caption explains it a little bit more. And these are from faculty research projects. Please bear with the technical information here, but it gives you a little more explanation of the image here than just a label or a title. And when you're thinking about your structure of the writing, remember this is more like a job interview than a journal article. So you want to make sure that the first thing that you say and the last thing that you say are very clear and exciting and innovative. And you should state exactly what you're proposing to do in the first paragraph of your paper. You don't want the reviewer to have to read and read and read and the whole time wonder, oh, what are they going to do? What do they want to do in this project? So right in the beginning, you want to say the proposed project will do X, Y, Z, and this is important because it will advance X, Y, Z. And you want to be very specific. And as I was talking about with the bolded text and the headers, you can see the difference between a proposal that doesn't have that, just a wall of text, and then a good proposal that has the headers and very clear what you're going to be talking about in each section. So you want to avoid those walls of text. Could you imagine reading the first bad example here compared to reading the good example? If you had to read 50 of these, it would be much easier to read this example that has, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about here. Next, I'm going to talk about the project objective. Next, I'm going to talk about the project methods. It's a lot easier for the reader. And again, we're writing for the reader or the reviewer. So along with the solicitation for the request for proposals or the funding opportunity announcement or the guidelines, when you're reading those, you should find in there the review criteria, the review guidelines. So you can't write a proposal until you know what you'll be graded on. So what are they going to, how are they going to review you? Sometimes it will say, you're going to receive a score from 0 to 10, 10 being this, 0 being this. And so you want to think about the review criteria before you start writing. Sometimes it will be as clear as in the background section, you'll be scored 0 to 10, with 10 showing that you're really understanding the literature from the past, and it tells you exactly what they want you to include in your background section. And so you always look at the review criteria when you get started, going through shredding, going through that, we call it shredding, when you're just like going through and pulling all the information out of that funding opportunity request. So here's some examples where you want to specifically write to the review criteria. So if the reviewer says, the reviewer criteria says, is the project issue, the project of this project will address important significance in the PI's area of research. Then you want to say in your proposal, this topic, this project topic, is an important area of research in, you say your name, because. So it's basically like when someone asks you an interview question. In an interview, they say, you know, why do you want to have this job? Then you would say, I want this job because. So you just reply to the question. It's almost like when you're reading the reviewer criteria, it's almost like they're asking you a question as a job interview. And so you want to answer each question in each of your sections of your proposal. So that research, reading through those proposal guidelines is so important so that you can address each one of these questions from the reviewer criteria. And you also might want to know who the reviewers are. Sometimes you can't find this information out. You just can't. And that's always a bummer. Most of the time you can find out who the reviewers are. You might not know their specific name, but you might know if they are in the discipline that you are that you're writing for. So maybe I'm writing about research in aphasia. Well, are my reviewers for my grant going to also research aphasia? Or are they going to know nothing about aphasia? And if they know nothing about aphasia, then I need to consider that when I'm writing my proposal. The way I write about it, I need to explain what it is because they might not be experts in my area. However, if they are experts in my area, then I'm going to need to make sure that I really know a lot about research that they might know about. You know, you want to write to the reviewer as well. A lot of the times they are not in your specific area of research. And so they're reading a lot of proposals that are outside of their area. They might be in a windowless conference room in a city far away from home. That often happens with federal agencies with their review sessions. And sometimes they're volunteers. They're not paid to be the reviewer. So it can be really frustrating for them if they're reading a lot of those walls of text of proposals. And if the proposal isn't written in a way that is relevant to their level of expertise. So make sure you think about that when you're writing a proposal. And then finally, these last areas of the proposal, the budget, ask for exactly what you need. If you ask for a lot of extra expenses, then the reviewers will figure that out. But if you don't ask for enough money, then they're going to think that it's not feasible to do the research. So you may be able to work with your department or college to kind of complete this budget. If you're a staff member or faculty, I know that's definitely the route you go. If you're a student, then you probably want to reach out to your undergraduate office of research, or if you're a graduate student, your graduate office of fellowships, grants and fellowships. Reach out to these offices to help you. But another really good strategy is looking at examples of successful proposals and seeing what they paid for. So if somebody was awarded a grant from the same agency that you want to apply for, they might be willing to share with you their proposal. And specifically, you could ask, would you also mind sharing your budget? Because I'm not exactly sure about how to write the budget section as well. So definitely think about that when you're trying to create a budget. And then there's also these supporting documents that are often required. They might ask you for your resume or your CV, or they call it a bio sketch, or letters of support. You know, you might do research in your department and you need to make sure that your chair or your department chair or your college dean supports your research. If you're doing, we did research where for aphasia, I did recent research with aphasia, and I worked with other groups that supported people with aphasia and provided therapy or wellness programs to people with aphasia. And they were helping us to recruit participants. And so I needed to get letters of support from those individuals to apply for a grant, saying that they would indeed help us to recruit participants. So it was just actually, usually when you get a letter of support, the researcher writes the letter of support and they send it to the person who they're asking for the letter from and say, is this letter okay? Something like this, would this be okay? And that individual will usually put it on their own letterhead and then send it back to you. So a lot of times the researcher does the work, even though you're getting the letter of support from somebody else. A lot of times you go ahead and write it for them so that you're not asking too much of them. That's just a little tip, side tip. And then you might need to describe equipment or facilities that you have. You might need to think about how you manage documents or any other researchers that you'll be working with. You might want to have plans for how that collaboration is going to work. And it's just, the main point of thinking about these supporting documents is that it does take a long time to get them together, and you want them to be quality as well. So your proposal, you spend a lot of time making sure that that is a really great quality piece, but you also want to do that for these supporting documents. So make sure you put that into your writing timeline. Whenever you're creating that writing timeline in the beginning, don't forget about the supporting documents. And that is all. If anyone has questions about proposal writing, you can ask those now or even the other sections. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can just unmute yourself.
I did have a quick question in regards to just touching all your bases in regards to making sure that you're eligible for this funding. You mentioned several different things, starting with Pivot, but then also if we need to work with our department or even just with the Office of Research and Development in regards to if this, I guess, developing our proposal. Do we first need to check to see if we can even complete it first with our departments, or, especially if it regards, a large budget? I'm just kind of confused on our checklist of who we need to go through several times in regards to when we want a proposal.
Good question, Tara. And that is something that all of our offices really specialize in. We are connectors, networkers.
Okay.
Connect you with the people that you need to talk with, and we will help you with the part that we can help you with. Our office, we edit proposals for faculty and staff.
Okay.
So that's part of what our office does. But there are offices that we collaborate with and work with that help you with the proposal submission. We help with all that pre-proposal stuff, which includes proposal timelines, creating proposal timelines, going through RFPs with you, all of that pre-submission part. So if you are faculty or staff, please come to our office for that kind of support. Are you in a faculty or staff member position?
Yes, in faculty. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So definitely reach out and we will help you with that. But then we will also help to connect you with the folks in your department, if that's relevant, or college or at the university level, to help you to submit that proposal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
And Professor Hackett, also do want to invite you, so if you have students that you are mentoring now and have an interest in conducting research, idea grants. So this is summer research grants for undergraduate students. I know your colleague Meredith McQuarrie has had multiple students, I think almost every year. She's had a student get an idea grant. So I definitely want to, put that out there, that as you develop, as you continue to develop relationships with students, to have them, send them my way, and we can find out ways in which to get them funded.
Absolutely, I definitely will do that. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Yes, and any students, if you're unsure who to reach out to for this kind of information, If you're an undergraduate student, you can reach out to your undergraduate Office of Research. And if you're a graduate student, you can reach out to the Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards. And I will also let Michael Franklin and David Montez talk a little bit more about some funding opportunities right after this for undergrads. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. And I will turn it over to Michael and David here.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And just very briefly, in the context of undergraduate research at FSU, there is funding available should a student be interested in applying to one of the honors programs FSU has that is open to all students, independent of their membership to the honors program. So in other words, a student does not have to be a member of the honors program at FSU in order to do what is called honors in the major. There's other information about honors in the major that I'm going to be presenting on October 21st. I put the QR code on the screen. So should you be interested in attending, you're welcome to attend that to learn more about it. But within honors in the major, once you are active, you can apply for up to $750 in order to support your project. And that can look like anything. You know, it can be for needing funding to travel somewhere. It can be for equipment. It can be for software, for books. It's very broadly conceived, but it is an application process in ways that Rachel shared. You do have to put a budget together. So this is just one funding opportunity available to you. So either attend the QR event if you are interested in, or excuse me, take the QR code if you are interested in attending the event. Or if you're not able to attend the event, you're welcome to email me at hitm@fsu.edu. And I'm glad to share more about this specific funding opportunity. And now I will hand it over to David.
Thank you, Michael. So we just did that next slide, right? Or is it Rachel or Michael control? All right, as I mentioned before, I administer the Idea Grants program. It's a summer research program specifically for undergraduates. And similar to the Best Award Award, we offer funding for students from any major. These are creative art projects to what we think of as traditionally an engineering STEM type project. Right now, the awards are at a top individual award is at $2,000 and for teams, research teams working together at $3,000. These are quite often honors in the major, and that tends to be the expectation, honors in the major level type of work. In addition, it is independent work that is yours. So you may be doing projects that are tangential to a faculty mentor, but it is your independent work, and that's why we do emphasize that connection with honors in the major. Deadline is for a little while, not till February 1st, but starting tomorrow, we start a series of information sessions. As long as this meeting is shared and the recording, you'll see I just put into the chat the link directly to the Idea Grants webpage where you can find links to our application as well as connections for the next few info sessions, which we can dive into details. In addition, I just want to second pretty much everything Rachel said, and that all of her good tips on proposal writing is going to benefit you in an Idea Grant application submission. So we'll jump over to the next slide. So there's funding your actual conducting of your research, but then there's also the ability to go and disseminate, to share your research. That's why we're here. We don't want to hold it to ourselves. We want to share it out in the world. For those students who are in the College of Arts and Sciences, the CRE, Center for Undergraduate Research and Academic Engagement, disperses funds to enable you to travel to conferences. So the key thing being is that you're planning ahead of time. Okay, I know I've got this research project. I want to present at our annual conference or association, and then if we're planning ahead of time, submitting an application only 6 weeks prior. We also, similar to Best Award, we can provide up to $750 in travel costs. So this could be everything from hotel room, flight, as well as meals. Key caveat being when you apply that you have to work with our CRE staff to pay for that flight ticket ahead of time. We'll be able to reimburse you for other conference expenses such as the hotel and food and whatnot. But being able to attend a conference is a really fundamental part of being an academic researcher, and the ability to learn to share with others as well as to experience and network with other like-minded individuals is important. We want to help make that happen. All right, I think I'll wrap it from there. If you have any interest in any of the programs I mentioned before, or any other programs within the CRE, you can connect with me via the email I just placed into the chat. Thank you for this opportunity, Rachel, to share, and Michael.
And thank you. And for everybody who may be viewing this, feel free to reach out to any of us. If you have any questions regarding our respective areas, we'll be glad to assist.